Imagine this. For 12 long years, one man screamed the same message to the world. Women should not be in combat. They lower standards. They distract men. They don't belong. Then, in just 32 days, everything flips. He suddenly says, some of our greatest warriors are women. What changed? A Senate hearing room, a powerful woman with nothing but his own words, and 250,000 American servicewomen whose lives now hang in the balance. This is not just politics. This is the moment one senator took down a defense secretary nominee, using his own voice against him. You're about to witness the most brutal takedown of 2025. Stay until the end, because what happens next will shock you.
So if you're confirmed as Secretary of Defense, you will oversee our military, including about 250,000 women who currently serve on active duty in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Space Forces, and the Marines. And I have serious concerns that your behavior toward women disqualifies you from serving in this role. Now, I've been trying to get answers from you for quite some time on this. You haven't wanted to meet or to answer any of my questions, so we'll just have to do it here and dive in. I want to pick up on some of the questions asked by Senators Shaheen and Gillibrand and Hirono, and I just want to make sure we have a list of some of the facts that I think are undisputed. I'm not going to talk about anonymous sources. I'm just going to quote you directly. We've got the video. We've got it in print. So going back to January 2013, you told a Fox News interviewer that women in the military simply couldn't measure up to men in the military, saying that allowing women to serve in combat roles would force the military to lower the bar. You picked up on that same theme in 2015, making remarks on Fox News, referring to women in combat as, quote, it would erode standards. June 2024, you said on Ben Shapiro's podcast, quote, women shouldn't be in combat at all. And then, of course, we've talked about it in 2024. You published a book, and you say on page 26 of your book, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units. Page 48 of your book, you claim that women should not be in combat roles, because men are distracted by women. And then 10 weeks ago, you appeared on the Sean Ryan show and said, I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. Now, I presume you recall making all these statements?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the article you're pointing to in 2013, but it underscores my argument completely, because in that 2013 argument, I was talking about standards.
No,
standards are what it's always been about,
Let's not
Senator.
have this same fight
Always
again.
been about Senate
I've quoted
standards.
you directly. We've got the video. We're happy to show it. But I want to be clear here. For 12 years, you were quite open about your views, and your views were consistently the same. Women are inferior soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and guardians. And in case anyone missed the point, and these are your words from 10 weeks ago, women absolutely straight up should not be permitted to serve in combat. And I notice on each of these quotes, those are said without qualification. It's not by how much you can lift or how fast you can run. They don't belong in combat, period, or your words, straight up. And then on November 9th, 2024, just 32 days after your last public comment saying that women absolutely should not be in combat, you declared that, quote, some of our greatest warriors are women, and you support having them serve in combat. Now, that is a very, very big about face in a very, very short period of time. So help me understand, Mr. Hegseth, what extraordinary event happened in that 32-day period that made you change the core values you had expressed for the preceding 12 years?
She did not start with an accusation. She started with a number, 250,000. That is how many women are currently serving on active duty in the United States military. The Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Space Force, the Marines. 250,000 Americans in uniform, whose careers, whose safety, and whose futures would now fall under the authority of the man sitting across from her. And then Elizabeth Warren laid out 12 years of his own words, one by one, in order, on the record. 10 weeks before this hearing, 32 days before his nomination, and then she asked the question that made the whole room go quiet. What extraordinary event happened in that 32-day period? He did not have an answer, but she did.
I very much appreciate you bringing up my comments from 2013 because for me, this issue has always been about standards. And unfortunately, because of some of the people that have been in political power for the last 4 years, priorities other than standards, lethality, and meritocracy have driven decision-making.
I'm quoting you from the podcast. Women shouldn't be in combat at all. Where is the reference to standards? That they should be there if they can carry, if they can run. I don't see that at all, Mr. Hegseth. What I see is that there's a 32-day period in which you suddenly have another description about your views of women in the military. And I just want to know what changed in the 32 days that the song you sang is not the song you come in here today to sing.
Senator, the concerns I have and the concerns that many have had, especially in ground combat units, is that in pursuit of certain percentages or quotas, standards have been changed. And that makes the combat more difficult
let me make a
for everybody
suggestion
involved.
about what happened in that 32 days. You got a nomination from President Trump. Now, I've heard of deathbed conversions, but this is the first time I've heard of a nomination conversion. And I hope you understand that many women serving in the military right now might think that if you can convert so rapidly your long-held and aggressively pursued views in just 32 days, that 32 days after you get confirmed, maybe you'll just reverse those views and go back to the old guy who said straight up, women do not belong in combat. Now, Mr. Hegseth, you have written that after they retire, generals should be banned from working for the defense industry for 10 years. You and I agree on the corrosive effects of the revolving door between the Pentagon and defense contractors. It's something I would have liked to talk with you about if you'd come and been willing to visit with me. But the question I have for you on this is, will you put your money where your mouth is and agree that when you leave this job, you will not work for the defense industry for 10 years?
Senator, it's not even a question I've thought about because it's not one
think about it right now.
It's not one. My motivation for this job
I understand
has never
that. I
been
just
about
need
what
a
could
yes or no
conceivably
here.
come next.
Time is short. I just need a yes or no.
I would consult with the president about what the policy should be
In
at the Defense
other
Department.
words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years. But you're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
You'll be the one, let us just be clear, in charge of the generals. So you're saying sauce for the goose, but certainly not sauce for the gander?
Warren told the room up front that she had tried to get answers from Hegseth before the hearing. He had not agreed to meet. He had not answered her questions. So they would do it here, in public, on camera, with no ability to deflect to a private conversation that never happened. That framing matters. It told everyone watching that this was not a surprise ambush. It was a documented pattern of avoidance that Warren was now forcing into the open because there was no other available venue. And then she made a choice that is worth understanding. She said explicitly she was not going to talk about anonymous sources. No unnamed staffers, no off-the-record accounts, no he said, she said. She was going to quote Hegseth directly from videos that exist, from a book he published under his own name, from podcast appearances he chose to make. That is a lawyerly move. It closes the escape hatch in advance. Because the standard deflection when someone raises inconvenient statements is to question the source. Was it credible? Was it taken out of context? Was it secondhand? Warren eliminated all of that before Hegseth could reach for it. She told him what she was about to use. She told him the receipts existed. And then she started presenting them. 5 quotes, 12 years, one consistent position. The first was January 2013. A Fox News interview, Hegseth arguing that allowing women to serve in combat would force the military to lower standards, that women simply could not measure up. That is 12 years ago, a long time. People evolve, reasonable argument. But Warren was not stopping there. Fox News again. Women in combat would erode standards. Same word, same frame, same conclusion. June 2024, the Ben Shapiro podcast. Women should not be in combat at all. No qualifier. No unless they meet a certain standard. Not in combat at all. Then the book, his own book, published under his own name. Page 26, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units. Page 48, women should not be in combat roles because men are distracted by women. And then 10 weeks before the confirmation hearing, the Sean Ryan show, quote, I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. Straight up. Those are two words that leave no room for interpretation. Not I have concerns about standards. Not I think the bar should be uniform. Straight up. As in directly. As in without qualification. As in this is what I actually believe and I am saying it plainly. 5 data points across 12 years, all pointing in the same direction. All using language that goes beyond policy preference into flat categorical exclusion. And then November 9th, 2024, 32 days after the Sean Ryan show appearance, Hegseth publicly declares that some of our greatest warriors are women, and he supports having them serve in combat. Let that timeline sit for a second. 10 weeks before his confirmation hearing, he said straight up, women should not be in combat. 32 days later, he said some of our greatest warriors are women. The thing he called for excluding entirely, he was now calling among the greatest. That is not a refinement of a position. That is not a gradual evolution over years of experience and reflection. That is a 180-degree reversal in 32 days. And the only documented event in those 32 days was receiving a nomination from President Trump. Warren asked what extraordinary event happened in that 32-day period. Hegseth's answer was to go back to standards. This issue has always been about standards the last 4 years. Priorities over standards. Warren cut him off. She pointed to the Ben Shapiro podcast quote directly. Women should not be in combat at all. Where in that statement is the word standards? Where's the qualifier that says they could be there if they meet a certain threshold? It is not there. The quote does not say women should only serve in combat if standards are maintained. It says women should not be in combat at all. Hegseth did not have a response to that specific observation because there is no response. The quote says what it says. Warren was not misrepresenting it. She was reading it. And then she named what had actually happened. You got a nomination from President Trump. She called it a nomination conversion. She compared it to a deathbed conversion. And then she said something directed not at Hegseth, but at the women watching. If you can convert so rapidly your long-held and aggressively pursued views in just 32 days after you get confirmed, maybe you'll just reverse those views and go back to the old guy who said straight up, women do not belong in combat. That is a specific and serious concern, not rhetorical, not inflammatory, logical. If the mechanism that produced the reversal was a nomination, the mechanism that could produce another reversal is already in place. A confirmation, a presidential relationship, a policy agenda. All of the same forces that apparently changed his views in 32 days are still present, still active. And the women currently serving in combat roles have no guarantee that the man who just told their senator he supports them will still be saying that 6 months into the job. Warren was not asking women to trust his conversion. She was pointing out why the conversion itself was the problem, regardless of its sincerity. Now, here is where the exchange gets even more precise. Because Warren did not just come with the quotes about women. She came with a second line of questioning that Hegseth had written himself. He had argued publicly that after they retire, generals should be banned from working for the defense industry for 10 years. The revolving door between the Pentagon and defense contractors, the idea that senior military leaders leave government service and immediately monetize their relationships and their access by going to work for the companies they were just awarding contracts to. Hegseth was on record opposing this. Warren noted they actually agreed on it. And then she asked the obvious question, will you pledge that when you leave this job, you will not work for the defense industry for 10 years? Hegseth said it was not something he had thought about because it was not his motivation for the job. Warren said she just needed a yes or no. Hegseth said he would consult with the president about what the policy should be. That answer deserves a full stop and a moment of attention, because what Hegseth was saying is that a personal ethical pledge about his own post-government conduct is something he would need to consult the president about, not something he would decide for himself, not something he could answer based on his own stated values. He would need to know what the president's policy was before he could tell Warren whether he personally would commit to not cashing in on his government service. Warren named what just happened. You are quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years, but you are not willing to make that same pledge. Hegseth said he was not a general. Warren answered that he would be the one in charge of the generals. And then came the closing line. Sauce for the goose, but certainly not sauce for the gander. That is an old idiom. What applies to one should apply to the other. If the standard is right for generals, it is right for the civilian who commands them. If the revolving door is corrupting for military officers, it is corrupting for a Secretary of Defense. Hegseth had written the argument himself. He had made the case publicly. And when asked to apply it to his own future conduct, he retreated to needing presidential guidance. The structure of Warren's entire exchange was the same both times. She used his own words against him. Not opponent research, not partisan framing, his words, his book, his podcast, his published argument about the revolving door, his conversion statement 32 days after his nomination. Every trap she set was built from material he had personally produced. That is a prosecutorial technique. You do not introduce your own theory of the case. You use the witness's own statements to build the contradiction. You let him explain why 2013 and 2024 say the same thing, while November 9th says the opposite. You let him explain why generals should be bound by an ethics standard he himself argued for, but he should not be. Hegseth never explained either one. On the women question, he retreated to standards even when shown a quote that contained no reference to standards. On the revolving door question, he retreated to presidential consultation even though it was his own stated principle. Both retreats were visible. Both were captured on camera. Both are now part of the permanent record of his confirmation process. And underneath the specific questions was the same issue that Warren named at the very start. 250,000 women currently serve in the uniform of the United States military. They are not hypothetical. They are not statistics. They are soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen and guardians who get up every day and do the job, who have deployed, who have served in combat zones, who have earned their place through the same mechanisms that any male service member earns theirs. The man who was being confirmed to lead them had spent 12 years saying straight up they should not be there. And 32 days after receiving a nomination, he said they were among the greatest warriors. Warren was not asking the Senate to decide which version of Hegseth was real. She was asking them to consider what it means for those 250,000 women that the question is open at all. The nomination conversion line will outlast this hearing. It will be cited when his first policy decision affecting women in the military comes out of the Pentagon. It will be cited when the first report surfaces about standards being changed. It will be cited because Warren built it from his own words and his own timeline, and there is no version of the record where it does not fit. Sauce for the goose. That is what the hearing room heard on that day from a senator who could not get a private meeting. So she brought the receipts into a public room and laid them on the table one by one. And the man who wrote the book sat across from her and told her he would have to consult with the president.